I want to bring up my friend and colleague, Reverend Noel Anderson. Noel is the grassroots coordinator for immigrant rights for Church World Service and the United Church of Christ, and he's a common face in many of our communities that are doing work around immigration rights and justice, and he certainly is a common face in Washington at the head of many of our protests within the faith community. So Noel, thank you for your work, thank you for being here today, and thank you for introducing this panel. Let's give Noel a round of applause.
Thanks, Mike. It is an honor to be up here next to these amazing leaders in the movement. Church World Service was one of the Defend the Dream steering committee members, and many of the folk here today, we were strategizing, organizing, hitting the streets, and these folk really led the movement for the DREAM Act over the last 6 months, over the last 6 years, even 10 years. And I think it's important. I just want to note that we have a legal victory right now on the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival because of the organizing. That battle was won on the streets. The administration could have still terminated it if they wanted to, but they won't. Why? Because we have 80 to 90% approval rating, because we've been in those politicians' face. I know Jonathan and I were saying a prayer together recently in Senator McConnell's office. And that's the thing, is we have to show up and bring our faith to the public square, to the streets, to the politicians' offices. And so with no further ado, I'll just say also that the temporary protective status, which we're going to talk about, is also really important. We'll be talking about on this panel, and we have to keep that fight up. Honduras is coming up real quick here. And so the battle, la lucha sigue, the struggle continues. And I'm honored to introduce right now Reverend Rena Ramos, who really organized me when I was in seminary and got me to Central America and working with the Share Foundation and learning more about liberation theology. And she's now the pastor of Ministerio Latino, a UCC congregation that is open and affirming, and a Latinx ministry in Oakland, California. So I will hand it over to Reverend Rena Ramos.
Thank you. Thank you. Gracias, Noel. And it's quite an honor to be here moderating this panel with this group of young activists, a force behind the scenes, in the streets, these young activists at the front line of this movement. And I have a confession, since I'm in a church setting. Confessions are very, common. And the confession is that 5 years ago, I was listening to NPR. It was the beginning of the coming out of a lot of young people coming out of the shadows and being undocumented and unafraid. And there was a program about this. And they were talking about the frustration of graduating from high school and not being able to continue into college careers and not being able to work after they got a degree. And for a moment, judgment hit my head. And it's like, why do the immigrant parents put their kids through this? And then it took me like 3 or 4 minutes to remember that I was 14 when I crossed the border, when my aunt decided we needed to be reunited with my mother, who was already in New York, and went and got my brother and I, got herself a coyote and a smuggler, took us a month to come to the US, and that 30-something years ago, I was a dreamer. I pull over, I cry. I cry because privilege has blinded me for a second. And I cry because I also remember the vulnerability, and I could understand this pain. And so for me, it's a great pleasure, a great honor to be introducing these activists. And we have as panelists here, Orlando Gallardo Parra. And we have Diana Pliego, Jonathan Hayes Greens, Pratishka Khanna, and they all going to start us by telling us a little bit about themselves, their organization, their work.
Thank you, Rena. You were supposed to keep talking until I finish my sandwich.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. My name is Orlando. I'm a United Methodist pastor. I was born in Acapulco, Mexico. I came to the United States when I was 15 years old. My mom and my brother, they decided that I should come here without documents. They tried to get me here with documents, but it was nearly impossible. And so when I was 15 years old, I came to the United States, and at the border, I spent about a week with no food and afraid of my life. And so I didn't know what was going to happen to me. And that was the very first time in my life that I ever prayed. And that's where I met God at the border as an undocumented immigrant. Right now that I had the theological language to speak about that experience, I can say that God met me there and welcomed me into this nation. And God told me that God had a plan for me at that time. So I came to the United States. I came to Waterloo, Iowa. I went to high school. I went to college. And I went to seminary, all of this without papers. And in 2016, I met my beautiful wife, and I got married to her. In 2012, I graduated from seminary, but because I didn't have any documents, I was working at a taco place, getting paid $7.50 an hour with my degree of divinity. So I was making holy tacos, that's what we say. But in 2012, Obama passed Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and I was able to apply, and I got DACA. And then because of DACA, I was able to begin the process of becoming an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church. I recently got approved, and so in June, I'm going to be ordained. I'm going to be a full member in the United Methodist Church. So thank you. That's me in a nutshell. And am I supposed to introduce her? Diana? Oh, sorry.
I got it. It's all good. Thank you so much, everyone. I think, first of all, for being here and being willing to listen to our voices and our stories, and for your willingness to take time out of your day in life to advocate with us. So my name is Diana Plago. I'm currently a policy associate at the National Immigration Law Center, where I feel so privileged to be able to work every single day, not just for my rights, but for the rights of my community and my parents, who were the ones that sacrificed everything for me to be here. I was born originally in Mexico, and upon great economic and financial difficulties, my father decided to immigrate to the United States to try to provide for his family. A year later, my incredibly brave and courageous mother decided to cross the border with her 3 children. One was 5, I was 3, and my baby brother was 7 months old. And she did that because she believed, and she had prayed long and hard, and God told her that this was where we needed to be. And he brought us through. And I think ever since then, I think God has made a way. And I think in 2012, God made a way for me personally with the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, because I was that overachieving high school student who didn't have a future and who wanted to drop out because I didn't see a future. And that program allowed me to do what I'm doing now. It allowed me to come out and share my story, realize that we have a power within our voices, within our stories, but we have a power as a movement and as a community, and that we can advocate for ourselves, and that we can bring others along to bring change and make things happen. And that's how it all happened. I started organizing in college, and step by step, God has opened up doors, and now I'm here advocating in DC, and I intend to continue to use every single blessing that I have been given and every single ounce of privilege that I've been given within my own community to continue advocating for my parents until they have legal status, and my community until they all feel safe in their homes and in their churches and when they walk down the street. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Wow, can we do that again? Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. I feel so at home. My parents were actually ministers growing up, so faith and faith communities are really close to my heart. So it's so good to see all of you out here in this Advocacy Day, so thank you for organizing this. My name is Jonathan Jase Greene. I am the co-founder and director of the Undocu Black Network. Has anyone heard about the Undocu Black Network? Okay, some folks have heard about us. So we are a multi-generational network of undocumented Black people, organizing our own communities and building power. As you might already know, there's 4.2 million Black immigrants in this country, over 600,000 of which are actually undocumented, just like myself. So for us, immigration is a Black issue, if you see my shirt. And for us, it's really important to talk about Black immigrants in this context, not just because we're cute from across, the diaspora, right? But we want to talk about Black experiences and immigration. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the criminalization of Black immigrants, the detention and deportation of our folks, right? The ways in which our folks experience living at the intersection of xenophobia and anti-Blackness. It's deadly for our folks. So we've built an organization to organize people who are living at the intersection, to break down these silos, to be able to say to the world, for a long time, our struggles have been ignored, unseen, right? And we're changing that. Oftentimes, I actually remember Marilena, actually, from the National Immigration Law Center, when she first heard about our work, she said one phrase that really stuck to us. She said, "You're doing divine work." And that's really resonated with me because my parents being ministers, I think they wanted me to be a pastor or a minister of some sort. That's not happening, no. But I believe that the work that I'm doing now is ministry. Because I believe that I've been called to seek justice, to love mercy, right? That's what the book that I read told me about. I don't know about y'all. But it's really important to talk about really bring to light the policy priorities of Black immigrants, right? We've talked about the DREAM Act. There's over 56,000 Black, at least over 56,000 Black undocumented young people that would have qualified for a DREAM Act, right? But we also talk about TPS. Who's heard about TPS? Yes, okay, I love y'all, okay. So there's at least 70,000 Black immigrants who have TPS, combining the numbers from Haiti, Sudan, South Sudan, right? And then also the diversity visa program. Who's heard about the diversity visa program? Wow, y'all are really informed. For those of you who didn't raise your hand, the diversity visa program is a program that allots 50,000 visas to migrants from low admission countries. And you've heard the person who sits at the White House talking about the lottery and how awful it is, right? But that program actually, 40% in the past 3 years, that program has brought over 20,000 African migrants in the past couple of years. So to us, the diversity visa program is also a Black immigrant agenda, right? And then lastly, wanted to also share that there was a report that showed the detention and deportation numbers for the first fiscal year of the Trump administration. And if you look at all the immigrant groups, the group that had the highest deportation rates was actually African migrants. And then if you break it down by nationality, Somali migrants were actually had the highest. I think it had quadrupled from what it was in 2016 to 2017. Who can tell me why Somali migrants are under such attack? They're Muslim, right? So not just at the intersection of anti-Blackness, xenophobia, but also Islamophobia, right? So I think this is why when we do this work, we have to keep an eye out for the ways in which the people who are living at these intersections are being impacted by these issues, right? We hear about intersectionality all the time. This is why it matters. Thank you.
Hi everyone, how are y'all? How's lunch? My name is Pratishta Khanna and I'm here with Nakasak. I'm here because I was firstly invited to be a part of this amazing group. So I'm really, really thankful that you all are spending your lunch with us and curious, and also I hope you all take away as much as we know we will from this amazing audience. I started working with Nakasak back in 2013. My first experience working with them was fasting on the Capitol alongside congressional members and also alongside civil rights justices. But my work within my community and a small group of us started back in 2011, 2012 when Maryland was trying to put the Maryland State DREAM Act onto the ballot. We said if our leaders are afraid of losing their votes, then we'll ask the voters to do the favor to us. So we did triumph, and we did pass the Maryland State DREAM Act November 6, 2012. Woohoo, Maryland! My personal journey, I migrated from India with my parents with passports and visas in hand, and I make a point on that because I stand strong, bold, unafraid, next to my peers who've crossed borders and stayed hungry months, weeks, trying to come into this land of opportunities. So my reason into this fight is to highlight the vast experiences of all of my peers, whether it be Black peers or Hispanic, Latino peers. And so I work with, currently in Maryland, with undocumented youth, those who have the privilege of living with DACA, like myself, and also those who are completely undocumented. The struggle continues from high school to community colleges and four-year universities. And so we are trying to open and centralize more resources so that more of us can get to colleges and live out our dreams and live out effectively and be then paid forward. So my work is to make sure that I get to where I want to get to professionally and personally, and then to make sure 10 others are following my lead, and then those 10 paid back to 20 other, and that's how I wish and hope to move forward. My plans in the recent coming months, I'll be starting school in Pomona, California. I'll be pursuing a master's in biomedical sciences. My goal is to go to medical school. And I hope to treat many communities at the border, disfranchised years and generations of Black folks in Baltimore City, and anybody else who I can help, and hope that their lives are just as mattered as mine and all of yours is.
So thank you very much for giving us a glimpse to who you are. And we want to know more about what you are doing and how you are situated in the movement. So how you work and the place you are in the movement.
Well, I'm a DACA recipient, so I'm always sharing my story every time I get asked, and even when I don't get asked, I share my story. And just challenging the negative rhetoric that immigrants are criminals, so they don't pay taxes, so they're not are here to do bad things. And I just tell them, I'm a pastor and I pay my taxes, so there you go. I'm also I do ministry. I'm a pastor, so I anything from teaching dancing classes to praying for people and doing all kinds of things. I'm involved in the community. And I'm also learning about new issues every day, because I feel like all the issues that we have are connected, from racism to discriminations against LGBTQ people to empowering women to become leaders and to have power. So all of those things are connected, and so I'm kind of just learning and trying to figure out how to even go farther than just immigration. So, yeah.
Yeah, so we were talking about this question outside earlier, and I said, I don't think I situated myself. I think God was just like, and here you go. Being that this is my everyday life, I'm a DACA recipient, but I spent a long time being undocumented, and I come from a mixed status family, meaning that my parents still don't have any kind of status. I have a younger brother who's a U.S. citizen and serving in our military, and two other brothers who are also DACA recipients. So I live and breathe this every day. You can't shake it, right? And so I think when I got to school, I didn't have the privilege of saying, I want to do all of these things. I wanted to do all the things. It had very, very many interests, but I think I found my passion and my calling and my purpose in the reality that I was placed in. And I was privileged enough to have a high, college education and be part of a community that really cultivated my skills and talents and allowed me to channel that in a way that I could actually cause change to happen for myself and those around me. And now I find myself, first I started with organizing, right? Like, how do I get with other DACA recipients? And I went to school in South Carolina, which typically doesn't have wait, any South Carolinians? Woo, yes, oh my God, that makes me really excited. Sorry, I was like, I have not seen South Carolina represented here. Wow, that's so exciting. We don't have the best reputation. Lindsey Graham is championing the DREAM Act, but aside from that, we really don't have the greatest reputation. When I was trying to go to college, undocumented students couldn't even attend any institution of higher education that was public. My only options were private institutions, and that's why DACA changed my life, because it enabled me to work and my entire family to work just to put me through school. And so I started organizing, and I started just gathering dreamers from across the state and saying, hey, we are here. You're not the only one. You're not the only one in this situation, not the only one who's having to teach themselves how to get themselves into school and go through these processes. And just every step of the way, I think, has led me to where I am now, which is part of the National Immigration Law Center, which we work exclusively. Our mission is to advance and protect the rights of low-income immigrants, which is my life. And I'm so proud, so privileged to be a part of it and honored to be a part of it, because if you were to meet our team, you would just fall in love, because not only are they all brilliant, but they have the biggest hearts, and working at every single front, from the legislative front to working in the states to make sure there's protections at the local level, to making sure that we're in the courts and ensuring protections even when we don't have a congressional win. Because of the work that we're doing there, that my colleagues are doing on the legal front, is the reason that I was able to submit my renewal application and not lose my status at the end of this year. And so I think where I'm situated is I am just in a place where I feel strange using the word activist, because you don't want to hear me screaming in a megaphone. That is not a pretty sound. But I think I've been blessed to be in spaces where maybe you don't expect an undocumented person to be in. And so I will use that to my advantage and continue influencing spaces that we aren't expected to influence, to move this country in a direction where we can all be standing proudly and say that we are a welcoming nation of immigrants, regardless of their background, regardless of what race they are, regardless of their religion, and I will continue to move us in that direction. Thank you.
Amazing. So in terms of where do I situate myself in the movement, so in addition to constantly reminding folks that our Black undocumented community is here, that we exist, and the ways in which we experience this country, there's also a lie out there that Black people don't care about immigration. That is a lie. Yes, it is, from the pit of hell. And actually, it's not just because I'm saying it, but according to the Washington Post, no other ethnic group opposes Trump's racist, deadly border wall than Black Americans. You can clap for that. Nearly 9 in 10, or 87% of Black voters oppose the wall, compared to 71% of my Latinx family and 51% of my white family. Yeah, so I always like pointing that out, right? Because again, I'm tired of hearing this lie. And actually, early on in this year, as we were doing work around the DREAM Act and TPS, 7 Black civil rights leaders who had been working with us went to meet with Paul Ryan to bring forward our demands. And of course, he locked the doors and they were arrested. But the fact that they were willing to put their bodies on the line to uplift our agenda, to me, it's a beautiful example of how our destinies are joined, right? I live in the city of Baltimore, and I'm pretty sure the police department does not care whether whether I speak Spanish because I'm from Panama or not, right? I'm Black, I'm a young Black man. Panama, wow, okay. Y'all are really doing it out here, okay. So I think that in addition to really talking to and organizing with my community of Black undocumented folks, also building alliances, right, to be able to make sure that we are building meaningful relationships to overturn these systems of oppression is really important to me.
So where I see myself in the movement, I think for me, education is something that can tear down any border wall or other walls ever created. I'm a proud South Asian American living in America, also undocumented. And so I'm not supposed to really use my voice. It's just culturally not okay, right? And that started at home, where I had to sit down with my parents and say, you work super duper hard, and it's not okay that you don't have the opportunities available to you, like opportunities that my Native American-born friends have, or their parents have. I have to change that because no one's gonna change it for us. When I realized that that change has to be from within me and within my family, I realized that there are other families that we know that have the same limitations to them. And so then that overcoming those barriers is no longer just me and how it affects me, but it becomes about a community. And then when you look a little bit further, then you see Jonathan and his family. And you look a little bit further and you see other groups of friends that don't really look like you, don't really, dress like you, but they have the same struggles. And so what do? You don't say, because you don't look like me, I'm gonna build a wall or a fence to guide myself and make sure that I have all that I have, and you can just fend for yourself. That's not right. So to overcome that, education, I feel as though, is the biggest and the best means and mode to go forward, which is why when I graduated high school in 2009 and having no answers to my questions like, what do I do if I don't have a social security number? Do I not apply to colleges? But I just competed with everybody else and beat them. So you're gonna tell me that your highest ranking National Honor Society candidate won't go to college? If you don't have answers, I'll find them. And so that's my space. My space is finding answers to questions, or otherwise breaking down systems that have been in place in education for so many years that they've kind of become the norm. When they don't, not only does our immigration system helps nobody, I don't think immigration and system should be put together at all. I think it's foolish. Just like that, in education, when institutions come up and tell me and my peers that, oh, we don't have institutional aid for you. No, you combine federal aid and donations together, and so no longer do we have access to donations. But donations are meant for everybody. They're meant for the kindness of people who can't actually access any kind of resources. I'm talking about money. If someone can't access education in this first-class nation because of money, then this nation should not be a first-class nation. And if I can guarantee it, with every public and private institution, if I was to go to donors and tell them that this is what's happening with your money, public institutions would shut down overnight. So we bring the mirror to these systems, and we let them see themselves in the mirrors and tell us that they don't have the aid or the funds to allow undocumented students continue their education journeys. Because once we are educated, and once we hold places, and once we share stages, and once we occupy places where otherwise undocumented students or undocumented parents should be seen, Washington, D.C. wouldn't look like what it looks like today. That's my space in the movement.
Ooh, breathe in. Take it all. So with this, the current political situation challenges all, but you in particular, the challenges that is bringing to you and to your communities, to your organizations.
The challenge for my community is the sense of hopelessness especially around DACA. A lot of the Dreamer community in Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas, they were feeling helpless, and they feel like every time they turn around, they had to fight against another racist policy from the current administration. And so that's, I believe those are the challenges, trying to find hope and trying to take the little steps and little victories here and there on what we can change. And like I think Noel mentioned it, that now we're able to renew DACA for those who already have it. So that's a small victory that we have, but there is so much more that we want. And so that's a challenge, I would say, trying to fight racism and finding hope in that.
I turned over to Jonathan. I was like, where do I begin? Yeah, I think, God, I feel like every day there's like 3 big attacks on immigration, just like every day. Like on immigration alone, not even to mention all the other things that this administration is doing. But, you know, I think one of those quotes that I really, really enjoy is, because I think it speaks so much truth, is they tried to bury us and they didn't know that we were seeds. I truly, truly believe that even though this particular administration is here to raise hell, like they don't realize that we can give them so much more. The outpour of support that we have gotten, not just as an organization, but as a community. We didn't get the DREAM Act, but I have never seen this many people coming out in support of undocumented youth. Like, I've never seen this happen. This is the most support we've ever gotten. We have almost 90% of the American public on our side, for speaking of dreamers. And I don't think that you could get 90% of the American public to agree on a pizza topping, much less a political issue. And so for that reason, 1, I believe that we will win. And 2, I believe that this administration and the onslaught of attacks that it is having against immigrant communities, against refugees, against people of color, against people of different religions, like all of these things together, it is building power because it is bringing us closer and closer together. And, you know, from an organizational perspective, we're having to pick, okay, what are our priorities, but how can we support others and empower other organizations and work with each other to build this collective power and make sure that we change not just policy and win legal battles, but how can we ensure that we truly mold our society and the way that we view immigrants and refugees and people of color? How can we change that perspective so we never have to come here again? And that's what's happening, because the limelight that is on all of these attacks is bringing people to actually reconsider, is this who we really are as a nation? Is this who we want to be? It's bringing out a dark history that frankly this country has tried to erase from our origins, and it is making people reconsider who they thought we were as a nation and who we actually want to be. And so I actually dare to say that the challenges that are being brought on by the current political climate, we are turning into blessings, into opportunity to change who we really are as a nation. So yeah, I think that there's so many challenges, but we have to look at them as an opportunity to change who we are.
Yes, I said I love us. I do. Thank you. Love you too. Just really taken by that answer, because when you posed the question, the first word that came to my mind was trauma. Given that there are multiple attacks coming in every single direction possible on any given day, causes so much trauma in our communities. Causes new trauma, triggers old trauma, leads to us inflicting trauma on each other, right? So we at Undocumented Black spend a lot of time thinking about wellness, because we know that living in this country undocumented, or even being an immigrant, or even loving someone who is an immigrant or undocumented, is trauma, right? And then for our community, we also know that being Black has been trauma since the founding of this country. And oftentimes, our folks don't have adequate access to care. Oftentimes, it's stigmatized to even seek care or talk about depression, talk about anxiety, right? So I spent a lot of time really thinking through and trying to process all that's happening, right? Like, I've actually gotten really close to my therapist because of all that's happening. You know, and like, I have to. That's the only way I can make this happen, just trying to run an organization, but then also being directly impacted by every single thing being put out there. It wears you, it actually eats me alive, if I'm to be completely honest with you. And I think about the deportations that are happening, and you know, there's a couple of folks that we've been supporting directly in detention centers and hearing their voices, and then hearing the decisions that they are to be deported back to countries where they will most likely be at risk to die, right? That's trauma. Right, you know, just reading about one of the largest raids in the past decade that happened in Tennessee last week, that's trauma, right? Like, I don't know that we do enough of a job understanding it within that lens, and I think we need to, because we need to, if we are to last, however long this presidency will last. I think we need to be mindful and begin to really address mental wellness and really address how we are caring for each other and for ourselves, because otherwise we're not going to make it, y'all. Yeah. But you know, just leaning onto Diana's hopefulness, which I really appreciate. I think that has led us. That has been the challenge, and the opportunity that we've turned it into is to create a mental illness initiative to talk about these issues and talk about how do we bridge that gap, right? So that if our folks don't have traditional access to care, how do we become that source of care and have trained facilitators coming into our spaces? How do we think about sort of, you know, just creating the environment for our folks to be well, and how do we center that in our work? I think that's been the challenge, but I think that's the opportunity that we're faced with. And again, like, I feel like as long as we keep that at the top of our minds, we will win.
So I made that, because I feel like that's like the general emotion of when we say this United States presidency. Oh. So the challenges faced by generally all immigrant communities, I think, Jonathan touched on trauma. When a country this resilient lacks in mental health resources, period, right? Period. Like, everybody who should be touched, people like white folks that are born in this country that have succumbed to their disadvantages and broken families should have access to mental health resources, period. When those people don't have the access, imagine the marginalized, completely disenfranchised immigrant communities. Trauma is something faced every day because of color, race, origin, ethnicity. You wear something that others don't identify with. You talk in a language that someone else does not acknowledge. You have certain perspectives that people don't agree with. All of that succumbs to trauma. And our communities need resources now more than ever before. And the challenge is to bring these resources to them. The challenge is not just to say to these systems that exist and are largely non-functional, to say we need these resources, but then also the challenge is to have open doors from these communities and educate them and say, not everybody is coming to build a wall around you. Some people are actually coming to you and bringing resources to you and want to talk to you and want to understand that, you have trouble paying the electricity bill because you don't have opportunities to have low-paying jobs. offered to you anymore, or because contractors are largely shooing away immigrant workers because they don't want to have to deal with the government. When then these workers only know how to work with their hands, only know how to build, where do they go? How do they feed their families? And if they don't have these opportunities, which is bare minimum, how do they feed their families? When I was being put through undergraduate education just by my two parents, no federal aid, no scholarships, no help. My parents were fortunate to have a community around them who could employ them. They worked on less than minimum wage, but they were able to work extended hours and put me through college. Now to think that a lot of the communities that are now at that part of their child's educational journey are being turned away, are being told, you can't work here anymore, then how do these kids go to school? My parents were able to make it happen for me because they worked. Now that you're taking away work, where do we turn to? How do we go about our normal lives? Normal lives. So the challenge, I think, largely is to build bridges and liaisons and people who understand the struggle and who not only just, say things to make you feel better, but then to bring action to those things. And if that person or whoever that person may be telling you we can do this, that, and the other, then they go to their elected officials and say, hey, by the way, diversity and inclusion's great. It sounds amazing. What are you doing for your diversity and inclusion? If you're not doing anything, you need to get out. And if you are doing something, then more of it needs to happen, right? So I think building bridges amongst many different communities, bringing these allies together, these resources together, is a challenge, especially given the overall rhetoric around immigration being so negative, right? People who were willingly out and about and helping immigrant communities are today kind of sometimes shying away or want to do their work away from the limelight, when no, these are heroes. These people should be listening to us and taking our voices forward. And where and how does that matter? People who have the vote, you all matter. You all matter. You all mattered in 2016. You will all matter this coming November. You all will matter time and time again until we all have a vote too.
Thank you. And now let's talk about hope. And also a call to action to all of us, because we are in this together. So where do you find hope? And then for this call to action, I'll bring the words of Santos Romero de las Américas, Monsignor Oscar Romero of El Salvador, who said, let's be a microphone for God, sea un micrófono de Dios. So where do you find hope? What can we do?
I find hope on all the panelists here and everybody here today, on people. That's where I find my hope. Because without you all, I feel we'll be lonely, and it will be really hard to stay alive during these hard times. And I think my calling to action would be, when you encounter people who are racist and who are conservative, it is easy to spot them, and you can kind of either engage them and say, kind of see if they can change their mind, or ignore them altogether. And sometimes the white liberal church can be a little bit troublesome too, because sometimes they have certain they have in their mind a way in which an immigrant should be, and you have to fit into this frame of work. And if you're not like that, then you're a troublesome immigrant, and they probably don't want you around. So I think, and then also the white churches are kind of looking at immigrants in a way that they're doing charity work, and which is important work, because we do need some of that help of financial resources, and when somebody needs a place to stay, those are important things to do. But I think you had to be honest and say we're doing charity work, and also you had to keep yourself from claiming to be like the white hero complex, white savior complex, because you pat yourselves on the back, and then this starts this negative relationship where the immigrant becomes needy, and then you become the white savior that has to come and save them all the time. And I just want us to move from doing charity to doing work together to empowering immigrant communities so that they can take leadership roles and they can begin to change the world in that way. So that's my call to action.
It's a tough one. But you know what? That I think there's a lot of truth in that, and it's hard to hear sometimes, but I think you all are doing the work that's necessary, and I think that you're a good audience to receive that and to really, take that back and really apply that. I think for me, where I find hope, I think first and foremost it has always been God, right? It was God who confirmed to my mother that she should have taken that step, and even though everyone, literally her pastors, their entire community was like, don't you dare, like this is the worst decision, those kids could die. But she is a woman of God, and so is my dad, and they prayed so much, and that is why we're here, because God was looking out for us then and throughout. Even though there were so many financial difficulties, I could give you testimony again and again of how, even though we didn't think we were going to make ends meet, somehow they made a sale or something, and they got the exact dollar amount that they needed for whatever bill they needed to pay. And again with DACA, and then again how I got it just in time to get a loan so I didn't have to drop out of college. Or how he has just put people in my life again and again, because I don't believe I'm here by myself, which is why I talk about my privilege a lot, because I truly don't believe that I'm here all by myself. It literally took a village. It took all 6 of my family members and me to work to put me through school. It took him placing specific people in my life at specific times to push me in the direction that he wanted me to be in. But because God puts people in your life, I think he has placed you all here as well, and the millions of people who are now supportive of immigrant youth, because even though we didn't win the DREAM Act, one thing that gives me hope is that we didn't win it, and so now you and so many others are aware of what undocumented people face every single day. So yes, there's a support for DACA recipients like myself, but there are dreamers without status, because DACA was never intended to cover all dreamers, and it hasn't. And now with this, even with a lawsuit that we have a small victory in the courts, there are people who still don't qualify for DACA. And now people are aware of what the everyday life is of an undocumented immigrant, and I have hope that we will continue to build this momentum, and that we will continue, that this awareness will spread about not just the Hispanic community, but again for the intersection that people live in every single day, being Black immigrants, living at these intersections that you just can't shake off. And I think we're raising awareness about the struggles of marginalized communities, and I have hope that God is going to continue to place people where they need to be. So I guess my call to action is to be on the lookout for when God is placing you in the right place and time. What does he want you to do? And listen to that calling. Yes.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for that, as always. I'm in love with everyone on this panel. But I think what I really feel strongly in my heart is to tell you to build authentic relationships. I think some of the most transformative moments in my organizing work has been building with people that didn't, reach out to us because we were like the cool new kid on the block, but actually wanted to build a relationship and find out how to actually show up for us in a way that was respectful, in a way that was honoring and uplifting our humanity and dignity, right? It wasn't just transactional, it was transformational. Right, so I think what I would want you to do is to go back to your communities and work with the folks who are there, because I know that there has to be undocumented folks all over your communities, and build authentic relationships and figure out how they want you to show up for them, right? I think that's the best advice and call to action that I could give you. There's also more short-term things, like I know TPS is still on our radar. Proud to be a documented young person, but also like really show up for TPS holders as well, who are also in this fight. The deadline for Honduras is coming up as well. And also think through the next year where so many hundreds of thousands of TPS holders will be losing their status. So like, how do they want to be supported too, right? So I think these are things to consider. And also to just utilize whatever privilege and resources that you have to be able to support those people in your communities. Once you build those authentic relationships, and they delineate how they want to be supported, to utilize Deanna's word, understand that God's calling you to act and do it.
I just said faith without deeds is dead.
Where do I find hope? I'm really grateful for being undocumented. I really am. There are so many lessons to learn from coming from where we all come from. I think it was nicely said, understand why God has placed you where he has placed you. And I'm really grateful to be living out my undocumented struggle. Many times in life, when I don't have an answer and I can't not only act tough, but be tough for myself, I've learned to just say a prayer, turn to my mother. That's it. That's all I have to do. I have to say a prayer, just really close my eyes and say, I've surrendered. I cannot do it. And there's a lot of power in that, and that I go through that, if not every day, at least every week, once or twice, where you come across people who don't quite know really how to help you. They're sympathetic, but they don't know what to do or how to answer your questions or how to move forward from the roadblock that you are at. And so, you turn to people because you feel as though if I don't have the answer, maybe someone else will. Maybe someone else knows something I don't know. And then when that person doesn't know, you wonder, maybe I won't find the resolution to this problem. And that's when I've learned to just say a prayer. And there's been time and time again when I have said, if this doesn't happen this time, I will give up and I will move forward. And sure and behold, my prayers work and God does not let me give up. And that's important. To recognize that, smirk and smile, look above, be thankful, and start the hustle again the next day. Don't get cocky. That's what I have to remind myself every single day. Just because someone smiled and said, yes, you can get that, don't say, okay, done, easy. There's going to be 100 more hurdles coming your way, so you better prepare your next prayer. And that's where my hope comes from. That's where my hope comes for things that I can't conquer, and it also comes from my community. There are so many people who have allowed me the spaces that I have taken. I know it was gifted to me. I couldn't sit up here on the stage unless there were amazing people thinking, this is something we should talk about. These are the struggles we should highlight. And then to have people think, Pratishtha is a great person to talk about this. I wouldn't be here in front of you all. and I wouldn't have had this space. And I'm so grateful for all of you who will now take back these narratives and then explore within your communities, right? And that's the work that organizations do, that people do. They don't just talk about themselves and their struggles, but they build and hold people together and hope that that effect is taking over larger spaces. And that's my hope. My hope is that we don't just get cocky about our struggles and overcoming things, but we sit back, say a prayer, and start the hustle again tomorrow. That's my hope.
You all amazing. And now we're going to open up for a few questions.
So Rena, I'm going to moderate the Q&A so that you could answer as well. So let's leave that microphone for the panelists, and I'll go and hand it to you.
Hi, I'm Joanne Doe from New Hampshire, formerly of Massachusetts, so very New England. My question is, if you don't mind sharing, how old you were or how young you were when you started this DACA program, and if you have any hopes, being undocumented, of becoming interest in becoming a United States citizen in the future.
So DACA was announced in 2012, June 15th, 2012 to be exact. And I kind of want to touch on how that announcement was not, an overnight idea in the president's head. There was months and months and months of push from youth activists from across the country saying, we've reached this pinnacle in our lives where characteristically your schools tell us we've done our part, now on to the next step, which is college. We can't make it happen. We have the accolades we need, that's expected of us, but your system in place doesn't work for us. And so then DACA came about. I personally applied for it in August, 15 days after you could start applying for it. Yes, President Obama was the one who placed this executive order, and although it was announced on June 15th, you couldn't start filing for DACA until August 15th of 2012, because there's a process that's in place. USCIS has to get ready and put the system in place to receive hundreds of thousands of applications and then to safely process them. That's when I applied for it, and I will take advantage of it for as long as I can. This year, as you may all know, that DACA was at threat of being ended. March 5th was the supposed fantastical deadline. However, the court stepped in and there was a ruling against the plan that White House had. I was grateful to also be involved in that process. So now DACA is in place currently. There are no new applications being accepted, so that when you turn 15, a lot of people who otherwise would qualify could apply, right? But now that no longer exists, unfortunately. So there's be a new wave of people who are undocumented and trying to access college education and cannot, sadly. But I was supposed to renew my original DACA if this was a normal year this month. But I put in my renewal application in February, thanks to NACASEC and Korean Resource Center, back in February. So yes, I have just done my biometrics appointment, and I will be hopefully getting my renewal in the next 2 weeks. So sure and behold, those of us who have DACA still qualify for it within the realms of the executive action, are taking advantage and trying to do our best to make sure our peers are also able to take advantage and renew as fast as they can.
Did you mean that for all of us?
No,
Yeah.
well, I think maybe we can go,
Yeah.
yeah. If you want to say very quickly.
Came when I was 13, undocumented since, got DACA in 2013. There is no other like legal path for me to adjust status, so I'm stuck here until something changes.
Yeah, so I came to US when I was 3. I applied 2012, but it was approved in 2013. And of course, I want to be a US citizen. I want to have the power to vote. So, yes.
Amen.
I came when I was 15, and I'm applying next week to renew my DACA. I got married to my wife in 2016, and we're through the process right now. We finished the application. It took 6 months to get the answer to the application. And right now we're in the second phase, which we apply for a waiver, and it should take about 6 months to a year to get an answer. And then after that, I go out of the country to Juarez. And if I get it, then I'll be allowed back in. And the waiver is because I overstayed longer than a year in the U.S. without documents. Then I'm punished. I'm liable to be punished to go back to my country for 10 years without being allowed to come back. So the waiver is to say that my wife would suffer extreme hardship if I was gone for 10 years. So.
All right, we're going to take maybe these two questions here together. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Tia Lynn. I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri, but I live in Oakland. And my question is, what does effective collaboration or like coalitions look like when advocating for migrant rights?
And next.
I usually don't need a mic, but okay. Reverend Dr. Diane Johnson, also from Oakland. And specifically, how do folks create authentic relationships when they are situated in unconscious privilege and an unconscious bias? Little questions.
So really easy questions. I will take a stab at that first one, and then I know Jonathan has a really great answer, I'm sure. So now I'm blanking on the question. Build coalitions. Yes. So I think the one thing that I would say to remember is to put impacted, affected people at the center. Don't just bring them in to consult. The point is to empower people, right? If you have resources, how can you use those resources to empower people to make their own decisions? People in these communities that we live in, like, we know what our communities need. We don't need another organization to come in and tell us what we need. We need you who have those resources and then live in that privilege to work with us and not for us. So that would be my kind of tidbit for that question. And maybe should we answer?
Yeah.
I will try to do this quickly. Also, happy to talk to you afterwards. So last year, Nakasek and Undocumented, we had a joint Black API Immigrant Day of Action in December, which we're really excited about. And I think that came out of being a part of the DREAM Act campaign and really wanting to make sure that not only were we mobilizing our own communities, but that we were telling our stories and injecting that into the longer narrative around who was undocumented in this country. So we're really excited. We're gonna bring 120 people to DC from both communities to do this action. And then it just dawned on me that we couldn't just like come to DC and do, have a photo shoot saying like, oh, we're in solidarity, without doing the actual work of addressing how we've been in community with each other, right? Of like talking about how white supremacy has colored how we treat each other, how anti-Blackness permeates Black and API relationship, right? So we ended up having a whole lot of workshops in the morning. So before we did anything public, having a morning of workshops just to be able to address that and to really have those really tense and uncomfortable conversations, because I just would not have it. So I didn't want to do a photo shoot without really doing anything meaningful. I think it's really important in that partnership process to do that hard work, to be able to address the structural, historical issues that our communities have been experiencing, right? And I think what was really beautiful about that day for me was that after we did all that work and we went out and had a press conference outside of the Capitol building, as soon as we got there to the room that we had reserved through a member of Congress, police presence increased within like minutes. We were just walking in, like setting up a little press conference. We had not one, two, but 4 members of Congress speaking, right? So it was like pretty official, I thought. And then like a whole lot of police came around, and then they brought their dogs. And their dogs started sniffing the women in our group who had hijabs. So it was just like really, really disturbing. But what was really beautiful about that moment is that because we had done the work that morning, the API community, particularly like Becky from Nakasek, actually took it upon themselves to call it out for what it is, a racist interaction, right? And I feel like usually that burden like weighs on us as Black people, having to like explain and feeling like no one's gonna believe us, right? But because we had done that work and they had the structural understanding about how we as Black bodies were policed, they were able to take that on. And I think that's like a perfect example of what I would want to have happened, right? Not just transactional, but actually digging deep and building long-lasting relationships.
All right. All right, we got one more. And Noel, did you have one in the back also? Okay, let's go to Ruben, I think, and then Angelique. Okay. And those will be the last 2, unfortunately.
Jonathan, you have made a statement that around 90% of African Americans actually believe that the wall is wrong.
Yes, 87%.
And that is great news. But as a person who is trying to do the grassroots and get to other mainline denominations, especially African American pastors who are not in the movement, who still have to deal with brothers walking in Starbucks and getting arrested. How then do we bridge that gap and bringing more of those pastors into rooms like this so that our traditional understanding of how to lead in these things, how to bring that inspiration and that prophetic fire to these type of movements, how do we actually bridge that gap and begin to actually make that authentic relationship? Because they want to come in, but and I think a lot of them want to be a part, but they feel like they've been left out of it. And also they said, have the other issues. How do we then bridge those gaps?
Which state are you in?
Say that again.
Which state are you in?
I'm here with Church World Service.
Amazing. So let's work together, because that's the work of my heart, to be honest. And I think that there is a reason why they feel left out, and it is that they have been left out. Just gonna be honest about that, right? But I think what's so beautiful and why I love the work that I do with UndocuBlack is that we get to be that bridge, right? And like really, I think whenever I talk to someone who's a Black American about immigration, as soon as I explain the ways in which we have a Black experience to immigration, folks get it real quick, right? So I think that's not hard. It's just more about making that connection, and I would love to work with you on that.
I will simply add, because I work in that community, particularly with National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated, and there are groups like the Conference of National Black Churches. There's a Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. There are places where people of African descent who are in pastoral leadership are organizing themselves. And we've got to come alongside in coalition building with where they are and where we need to be together. So I would say, let's think about those things as well. And we have this last question.
Last question.
Good morning. So my question is very specific in relation to the college process that you were discussing. So I heard you say that colleges will say that they don't have funding because they've tied together federal funding and private donations. Has there been any success with getting colleges to do that separation?
It's a great question. So who has been accounted for, right? Like who's taking the accountability? It comes a lot by going back to people who have done this. There are many different organizations. My particular interest in this little tidbit is because I know my career path is super duper long, and I'm gonna have to go through realms of educational institutions, and who's gonna be able to receive me the way I ought to be received, right? Coming from this greatly marginalized background. Yes, there has been successes. A dear friend and a group by the name of Pre-Health Dreamers that are located primarily in California are the ones who are doing this great work. There have been programs that we've been successful in terms of saying, you do have the funding. If you didn't have the funding, you wouldn't have scholarships. You are advertising scholarships why are they not open to undocumented students, those with and those without DACA? It's just about bringing, deans and associate deans together and sitting in their room and making them aware that you are also aware of how this process works. And it happens with a lot of research. We found out about this because we had an ally at UCLA, a renowned name at UCLA, who said, by the way, this is how funding works. Had they not sat down with us, had they not told us this is how funds are brought together, we wouldn't have known, right? We would have knocked on the same doors without any sort of definitive answers or resolutions. Now that this person is telling us a prestigious name like UCLA has this process, it has to be, if not exactly the same, somewhat similar in every other institution. A lot of people don't have the funding that UCLA has. Small colleges in Tennessee or small colleges in different southern states don't have the same support that UCLA has. So those people are even more disadvantaged. Those students are even more disadvantaged. We have a lot of allies in different states that are doing individual works, right? They're bringing together donors, and their donors are specifically saying, we want to put these people through school because that's one way we can move this community forward. And so knowing this little bit of information through public and private institutions, and then also having the backing of donors who strongly believe for the undocumented youth community has been really helpful. So my suggestion is to have these, if you know of organizations that are working in your community, particularly with the undocumented youth population, go to them. And if they don't know this bit of information, make them aware. Now, if you need more organization in specific cities, I'd be more than happy to connect you to people so that more and more students can find their way through college.
All right. Very, very quickly.
Hi everyone, my name is Mariana and I'm from UCLA, so I understand a little bit more of the process. If there are university or colleges that do not offer private funding for organizations, first you have to research how the funding is funneled or controlled in the college. Then you have to go to the deans and ask them as a congregation, as a group, like we are doing today or this Monday, to change the way they do that. If they don't listen, you go to your congressional, to your representatives and call them out there. If that doesn't happen, what we did in California, we changed the law. We made them provide private funding for undocumented students. So there, it's a long process, but it is possible.
Thank you for that. Okay, friends, let us offer our gratitude for this panel. Please stand. We asked you what brought you hope, and I must say that you bring us a lot of hope. Thank you all. Please be seated. We have one more photo op quickly. All right, as our panelists have the last moments of flash photography, we want to thank you for the hope that you provided and the ways in which you really embody the courage of which you speak of. We see that in your stories and in your words. So to take a moment to let this panel sink in, we're going to turn to Natalia for a minute.
But I want to explain in 30 seconds where the song is born from, because I think otherwise it just won't make that much sense. And I think it's also a way to honor not only you guys, but your parents, because it was your parents' dreams that brought you here, and now it's your dreams that are going to change the country. So this song is called One Hope. It's for Angelica Quechol. Angelica was from Puebla. She left Puebla when she was 19 years old. She had a baby. She walked across the border with that baby and her husband. They settled in Phoenix, Arizona. They became Mormon. That's become an American. And her two boys were raised in Phoenix, two beautiful little boys. They're really smart boys, really good in school. Went through high school, and she worked at the Panda Express. I don't know if y'all have a Panda Express here. You have a Panda Express? Well, Angelica, one morning, she got ready for work, 6 in the morning. It was dark, it was gray, it was raining outside in Phoenix, which is a strange thing for the desert. And she walks to the Panda Express, and she punches in, and her coworkers are there. And, you know, they're doing what they do every morning. And her coworker turns to her and he says, "Mexicanita, Arpaio's here. You need to get out." And she thought he was joking. If you don't know who Arpaio is, I'm not going to explain. Fine, figure it out. And she thought he was joking because he was Cuban. So she was like, yeah, you're Cuban. You don't have issues in this country with your papers. And he turns to her and says, "Angelica, you need to get out." And she turns around and she sees immigration, ICE, the police. They're coming down with helicopters. They're coming in with arms at the Panda Express. And all she can think of is, "Can you give me your phone just a second so I can call my husband?" Because he had his phone on him. And she calls home and she says, "Honey, amor." And he says, "Honey, we're seeing it on the news." And it's 7:30 in the morning, and her two boys are at home, and they're seeing all of this on TV. And I think that just that image of Angelica getting dragged into the patrol car, handcuffed, as armed guards are all around the Panda Express, and her two boys sitting at home seeing this is just like something I can't shake off of my head. And I say this because you know, your parents have been so courageous in bringing you here, and you guys will change the country, and they are at home, and so many of them are so afraid. So in honor of her and of you guys, this song is called "One Hope." The baby was barely a year old when Mama and Papa went north. They had big hopes for the little one, that he'd become what he dreamed of. The land that they went to was free, a place, opportunity. They worked so hard to give him what he needed to grow up strong. Daddy was always working late shifts. Mama left early to wash floors. That boy grew up like all the rest. There was homework at home, there were chores. Sometimes he dreamed of being a doctor. Other times he dreamed of singing songs. The world was wide and open. He couldn't wait to get to the stars. Brothers and sisters, I say, sisters and brothers, no. Vamos juntos, todos a seguir luchando. Brothers and sisters, I say, sisters and brothers, no. Vamos juntos, todos a seguir luchando. Then fear hit the streets like a storm, no. And Mama's voice, there was a shaking, and when she said she didn't say it, they're gonna send me far from you. Tell your brother that I love him, and you be good to your own papa. Brothers and sisters, I say, sisters and brothers, no. Vamos juntos, todos a seguir luchando. Brothers and sisters, I say, sisters and brothers, no. Vamos juntos, todos a seguir luchando. We can finish off together saying, here goes. We're in this together, in this together. We are in this together. Yeah, we are in this again. We are in this together, oh. We are in this together. We are in this, one last time. We're in this together. In this together, no. We are in this together. We are in this, no.
Thanks so much, everybody. I was moved to tears, so that try not to let that happen in public, but thank you so much, panel, Natalia. I just, I think so often, and I'm not supposed to be speaking, but I just am a little full, and I don't have to be undocumented to feel compassion and passionate about what they just shared with us. I can imagine, right? I can have a sense of it, what it felt like to go to work and have chaos break out. I have a sense of what it's like to be an honor student and not able to live up to your full potential because of something beyond your control. And so as much it is within our own power and strength, we need to go to Capitol Hill fired up and ready to go and make some change in this in our nation. We really, really do. For my United Methodist brothers and sisters, you may know the name Peter Story. He's a retired bishop out of South Africa. He taught me at Duke Divinity School, and one of the things he would always say is that individuals can show love to one another, but between peoples and between communities, justice is what shows love. And so if we want to be people who show love, we need to show justice to everybody in this nation, especially our neighbors and our friends who happen to be undocumented, but my God, what gifts are on this panel. What a blessing it is to be in just space with them. And so I will now give you the changes to the workshops. I'm sorry, that was just very moving. I am so grateful to all of you for just taking the time to really deposit that in our midst.